They said they got all the cancer. So why are they recommending chemo? This is probably one of the most confusing aspects in standard of care oncology today. So if this has confused you, you're not alone. There's a tumor. They go in and the surgeons get the tumor out. They come back to you and they say things like, there's clear margins, we got it all. And then next second, here you go. They follow it up with saying, you've got to do chemo and or radiation. Why would you need to do that if there were clean margins and they got all of it? So I want to explain this a little bit, unpack it, because you kind of have to back up and understand a little bit about cancer so that it makes sense, because this isn't what they're explaining to people. So when you have cancer, there are always what they call circulating tumor cells, meaning there are cancer cells that are in your blood circulation. Now, oncologists don't talk about this because, well, I don't know. But when they say they got it all, what they mean and what they're talking about is they got everything at the local tumor site. They're not talking about the fact that it's in your blood, which is what they're potentially looking to affect when they recommend things like chemo. And the level of these CTCs, the circulating tumor cells that are in your blood, are very interesting because most people have them circulating around their blood most of the time. Think about that. And this is where, when we understand how the body works, it all makes more sense. So I'm going to zoom out for a second here. The body is actually designed with several processes to address and kill these circulating tumor cells. There are natural killer cells, which are a type of white blood cells. So part of the immune system, we've got different processes of autophagy that can kick in and clean up things like these CTCs. And we've got proteolytic enzymes that the pancreas can release when you're not eating, which will also address these CTCs. Lots of processes that can go around and they look for things to clean up. This is really important to understand. So these things will look for things like cancer cells, mangled proteins, scar tissue, all of this kind of stuff, and chomp them down and clean up. So at any point, people would have circulating tumor cells. These levels don't necessarily get to zero. You know, we want everything perfect. It doesn't always happen that way. Now, when these tumor cells are not kept in check, meaning the immune system's not doing its job, that's when these cells can settle into an organ and create a tumor, whether we're talking about breast cancer, prostate cancer, thyroid cancer, some liver cancer. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. And the CTCs are still in the blood. That's why when I work with cancer clients, I want to back things up and say, what things overwhelmed the immune system and allowed that tumor to form? There's usually 7 or 8 big things that we can see in our current day functional testing that we also know from the research are known to cause cancer. So it's not one thing. Please hear that. It's never one thing that causes cancer. I have a whole video called Top 10 Root Causes of Cancer on what the root cause drivers of cancer are and how this works. Also, videos on the testing for this, all that. So dive into that if you want more information. But we want to really be keeping these circulating tumor cells in check so the chemo is looking at systemically working. It's usually not just, radiation because, that's more targeted, but they're really working on getting any areas that maybe were missed with the surgery, getting into the bloodstream in particular. And when we're talking about chemo, you might want to check out my video, The Number One Thing Oncologists Ignore, to learn how to use diet to make your chemo more effective if you do choose to do it. I also want to talk a little bit more about the lymph, because the lymph system, it's beyond confusing for most people. And there's a lot of weird things said and kind of just gray area here. And when you understand it, you'll understand that if there's cancer in the lymph nodes, I'm actually happy. Does that sound weird? Well, when I go over some basic anatomy, I think you'll agree. See, I was actually an anatomy teacher before I had cancer. And when I dove into the cancer world by necessity, I was so confused by the way they talked about lymph. The oncologists say if there's cancer cells in your lymph nodes, is bad and you have to remove those bad lymph nodes. And then you get the designation jump up to stage 3 rather. Very serious designation. So here's a basic overview of the lymph and see if you understand better why I was confused. So when the blood goes out from your heart to your arm or leg or something, it's going to then diffuse out of the capillaries into the intracellular space. So that's the space around and in between the cells. The red blood cells, they stay in the circulation system though. So now the fluid that's between the cells, it's going to drop off some nutrients, some oxygen and things to the surrounding cells. And then it's going to pick up the trash. So anything that the cell is needing to get rid of, any waste products, it's going to grab that. And then in order to get back into the circulation system, the fluid is going to go into the lymph vessels and be part of the lymph fluid. And that's how it's going to travel back to the blood vessels. Why would it do this? This seems kind of weird. Why wouldn't it just get back online the same into the veins and go the same way it came? So it picks up the garbage, right? And it's going into the lymph. And that's where the lymph is kind of referred to as the waste removal system. The fluid is going to then travel back through the lymph vessels to the center of the body where it's going to drain into the circulatory system. So it's going to come back into the veins and such. Now, as it travels along the appendages, there's lymph nodes basically at all the joints. So like maybe the wrists, the elbows, the armpits, things like the neck, the groin, these joint areas, there's a lot of lymph nodes. And I like to think of these lymph nodes as like the checkpoint stations for the big semis. So they're driving along on the freeways of your body and there's all these check stations. And what do you find at the truck checkpoints? There's, different officials looking to check the weight and make sure they're traveling and doing things right. Sometimes there's policemen and such that are making sure that trucks don't have things on board they're not supposed to. They're watching out for us and monitoring things. And that's exactly what happens in our lymph nodes. This is where the white blood cells hang out. That immune system, that's kind of like our police force. They are in those lymph nodes, especially the natural killer cells that I just talked about a second ago that are really great at chomping up those cancer cells, the circulating tumor cells. So any circulating tumor cells, pathogens, parasites, any of those kinds of bad actors, they're going to stop them. They're going to arrest them. They're going to contain them. And then the rest of the fluid can move on. So it's cleaning them out. Remember, it's got all the garbage, right? And this is how the body was designed. And it's one of the main mechanisms to clean out the blood through the lymph. So when we find circulating tumor cells in the lymph, I'm like, fantastic. The body is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And instead, our standard of care wants to take the lymph node out, off with its head, because there's cancer cells in it. Now, why would we take the lymph node out? It was doing its job. And if you take it out, then you have lymph fluid that was feeding into it that has nowhere to go. And it's just been cut off and just flowing into the rest of that surrounding tissue. And that's a lot of times where you get the edema, which is swelling, because the fluid is just pouring out into that tissue with nowhere specific to go, nowhere that it's directed to go. I propose that instead, let's get to the root issue and then support our lymph system in being able to do all that it needs to do so that it can address the circulating tumor cells in a real and actionable way. Let's support the system the way it was designed instead of creating other things. Now, while I'm on this note about the circulating tumor cells, I want you to know that we have technology, and I've had it for over a decade, to monitor these circulating tumor cells by doing what's called a blood biopsy, where all we do is a blood draw. It's not invasive, it's not toxic, and we can see the circulating tumor cells in there and see if they're elevated beyond what a normal person should have. Please keep in mind, that doesn't mean they're going to be zero, okay? I know a lot of fear exists in this area, and it's not about getting to zero. So you can even use these circulating tumor cells to see where the tumor originated from, what kind of tissue it is. Breast cancer, liver cancer, which is, pretty amazing. This is all FDA approved, and most of the companies out there are extremely accurate. And even though it's, non-toxic, minimally invasive, our standard of care doesn't use it very often, and it doesn't use it to diagnose, even though you can. This is just something out there that I want to mention because I think it's really exciting, and I'm hoping more people will lean on this technology in coming years, because a lot of the standard of care, whether it's, mammograms or tissue biopsies, they can cause and spread cancer. This is a known thing. A lot of people are really upset by this at this point. A lot of people who come to me are, at least, but we keep using it to try to detect cancer, which it's not a very effective strategy when you want to prevent cancer, to use detection things that cause cancer. So does that help give you guys a little bit more understanding about the chemo and why it's being recommended when they want to, make sure they get all the cancer, all of it? There may be better ways to do it though. And they know that this is not just at the tumor site, and they want to make sure it's not going anywhere else. Because keep in mind, they're also not addressing or even looking for why this happened, which, check out my other videos, we have that technology as well. Okay, so they're hedging their bets. This is smart when you only have the tools that our standard of care has, because they don't have any other tools. But in functional medicine, we have a wide variety of tools, not only to see why the cancer happened in the first place, but then to use natural diet, nutrition, lifestyle to address those areas and support the body so that the body can heal itself. Check out my video on the top 10 root cause drivers of cancer to get more information on how to unburden your immune system so that it can address those circulating tumor cells in its own body. Just know there is hope, and I'm here to help you find it.